Hello friends from Nu Skin. Thank you for joining me here at Nu Skin Live. I was looking forward to meeting all of you in person, but in life, things may not always go according to our plans, and we've got to pivot, adjust, and make the best of the cards that we're dealt with. Now you're here because you're high performers, and we're determined and we're goal-focused, but that can also make it harder to deal with unexpected changes. So I want to share a couple of stories from my professional and personal lives. In 2007, I was a young CEO at 36, and I was honored to be given a chance to build an airline from scratch. So I put together a detailed business plan, raised capital from international investors, applied for licenses and permits, and acquired my first plane. And it wasn't just another airline, but a new airline model that did not exist in the global aviation industry, which is a long-haul, low-cost airlines. And the next 7 years of growing the airline from that one plane to a fleet of 25 billion US dollars in annual revenue and getting it public listed, I learned that none of my business plans or budgets ever turned out as we had meticulously planned. So we launched in November 2007 with our very first flight to the Gold Coast. But in just a few months, the 2008 global financial crisis hit. All the banks that we had signed agreement to provide us with financing facilities to acquire new aircraft, all pulled out. And I learned about legal clauses like force majeure or material adverse circumstance that allowed the banks to pull out even after signing the loan contracts. Now in the same year, oil prices went crazy, right? It had been in the range of $50 to $75 from 2002 to 2007, and that's what our business plan was based on. But in 6 months of 2008, it doubled to $147 by June. Now, oil is 50% of our airline's cost, and no plan could have anticipated this shock. Now, on top of that, all the banks advise airlines to hedge their fuel as a way to mitigate the risk of oil price volatility, and that's what many airlines did, including us. Now, when we started to lock in the price of oil, it was about $100 a barrel, right? And we were relieved that when it peaked at $147 in June, 6 months later, it turned out it collapsed all the way to $32 a barrel, right? When we had locked in at a price of $100, that caused 50 airlines around the world to go bankrupt. And we narrowly avoided that fate because the bank who was the counterparty to our hedging contract, well, they went bankrupt first. What a narrow escape. And every single year after that, there was one shock after another. For example, in 2010, there was the Icelandic volcanic eruption that closed down the entire European airspace for a whole week, leaving thousands of our passengers stranded in London and stranded in Kuala Lumpur. And the very next year, we started flights to Tokyo, and we were immediately hit by the Tohoku earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear tragedy. The following year, just when we started flights to Christchurch, New Zealand, the city got hit by 2 earthquakes, and we had to pull out and withdraw from that market. And it wasn't just natural disasters. Every year, we had to deal with a difficult policy or regulatory environment with restrictions being imposed on us to limit competition with national airlines. But nothing compared to 2014, when we had not 1, not 2, but 3 black swan events. Now, black swans are rare events, difficult to predict, and it has major consequences. In our case, we had the MH370, where a plane disappeared in March. Then in July, there was MH17, where a plane was shot down over Ukraine. And finally, QZ8501 in December, when a plane was lost en route from Indonesia to Singapore. Now, although none of the planes were from my airline, it severely impacted demand for travel to Malaysia and caused a 30% reduction in revenue. The first year as a public listed company, and we were already hit with another crisis. Even in my personal life, nothing went according to plan. In May 2018, while I was cycling in Kuala Lumpur, a car came from behind at very high speeds and hit me hard, leaving me completely unconscious. I woke up in the intensive care unit of the hospital with fractures on my skull, bleeding in the brain, 3 of my 4 limbs were in a cast. And sometimes life knocks you down hard. And in this case, literally knocks you down hard and really painful. As I lay in that hospital bed, I was overwhelmed with emotion, fear, anxiety, depression. What was going to happen to me? Will I be able to lead a normal life again? What was going to happen to the new business that I had just started? How will I provide for my family? Right? All of us, when we go through these negative emotions, when we're faced by setbacks and failures, you realize there's no way I could find the answers to these big questions. When things become overwhelming, I needed to focus on the smallest things that I could do that were within my control and put aside the worries of the bigger questions. And so with the support of my family and hospital staff, I just focused on learning how to sit up from my bed and start to walk. So on the 7th day, I started to take my first steps in the ward, even when one of my legs was still fractured. But this gave me momentum. I celebrated these small wins, right? I keep focusing on what I can do rather than worry about the things that were then out of my control. So I deliberately stopped thinking about that driver that hit me, right? And told people who were asking me, what happened to him? Did I not want to know? But I was not angry. I didn't want to know, right? I wanted to use all my energy to heal and get stronger and not waste it on feeling angry at someone else, right? And so with momentum, I could start walking. I went on the treadmill on day 33 and slowly increasing the time from just 5 minutes a day to 10 to 15 to 30 minutes. By day 47, I could pick up the pace and I could start to run on the treadmill. Now the joy came 2 months after the accident when I could run outdoors, that feeling of liberation and elation. But an even bigger joy and the big psychological milestone was to be able to get back on a bicycle, a new bicycle, and to be able to ride outdoors again with my friends on day 84, less than 3 months from that accident. Momentum fuels more momentum. With physiotherapy sessions 5 days a week, many of them painful sessions, I worked on gaining my shoulder and arm mobility as my broken shoulder healed, right? And on day 112, I could get back a full rotation of my arm and I could start swimming again in the pool. By then, I had a very specific goal in mind. I wanted to get back to Ironman triathlon racing. I worked hard with my coaches and kept working on my strength and stamina and signed up for the Ironman triathlon race in Langkawi, Malaysia in November of that year. See, this is important to me because being a triathlete was a big part of my identity. So on day 174, less than 6 months from that accident, I was able to complete the Ironman 70.3 Langkawi Triathlon, swimming, cycling, and running. My motivation was I wanted to tell my children, and for parents out there, you know our children do not listen to what we tell them. They learn by observing what we do. Same thing with our team members. And the message for my children is, life is going to knock us down hard, very hard, and we can't control what's going to happen to us. But we can decide how we choose to respond to these challenges. So this is why it's important to understand that our initial reactions and impulses to things that happen to us are automatic, and it may limit us, right? Because our brains are designed for one primary purpose, which is to keep us alive, our survival instinct. But the way the brain does this is that it steers us away to its things that are familiar, things that are predictable and reliable. It does not like things that are unknown, risky, or dangerous. Because our brain receives 50 million sensory inputs every single moment, and we can only consciously process just 7 or 8. And so the brain filters out everything quickly based on these gut instincts, right? That is why when you meet someone, even before that person has said a single word, our brain has already made a judgment whether you like that person or not, right? And these quick judgments they can be limiting. The brain may tell us that we cannot do something because it hasn't seen us succeed before. It tells us to stick to doing the same things and to avoid anything that's dangerous or unknown because that might cause us stress, right? It's the brain's warning signs. Danger, danger, danger. But my message to you is that stress, this danger sign, it's actually necessary. It's good for us. We need stress to perform our best. We don't want to avoid stress, but we need to learn how we can respond to it positively. You see, stress is a biological response when the brain wants the body to spring into action. If the brain senses danger, for example, if a lion were chasing an antelope in the savannah, the antelope's body experiences a surge of stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, to get the heart to beat faster, the lungs to expand, and the muscles to be primed for action. These hormones also narrow the brain to only focus on the immediate threat. It shuts down the digestive system, it shuts down the reproductive system, and it even slows down the brain's ability to think creatively. It just wants to survive. Now, the lion who is chasing the antelope also needs to experience stress. Those same stress hormones also makes the lion's heart beat faster, the lungs to expand, and the muscles primed for action in order to catch the antelope. Because if the lion doesn't catch its prey for several days, it may starve to death. Now, in today's modern world, hopefully, none of you may have to experience the threat of a lion chasing you. But today's threat may come from our bosses being angry at us or our clients being upset, right? We experience pressures from sales targets or bills to pay at the end of the month, or maybe our spouse is unhappy with us. We experience the same hormonal reactions as if a lion is chasing after us. So stress occurs whether we're the predator or the prey. But we can choose whether we respond as a predator or we respond as a prey or a victim, right? It's our choice. And this is why some people enjoy the thrill of a roller coaster ride or skydiving, while other people are deathly afraid of the same thing, right? Or even public speaking, right? People who skydive experience the same nervous energy, but they look at it not as something to avoid, but something that they channel into action. We choose how we look at stress. Now, unlike the antelope, when the lion stops chasing after it, because maybe the lion's out of breath, the antelope can go back to grazing again, right? And all the stress hormones just dissipate away. But for humans, we've evolved where it's harder for us to let go of stress feelings once the immediate threats go away. For some of us, even when the threat has not yet emerged, the boss has not become angry yet, the customer's not yet upset, we still have time to achieve our sales targets, or our spouse is not yet upset at us, we anticipate that it might happen, and it already causes those stress hormones to surge. This is anxiety, where we become worried about potential threats that have not yet emerged. And when we worry, these videos keep playing in our head over and over. Now, for some other people, once the threats have passed, we still can't stop the videos from playing in our head. This is what we call depression. When something that has already passed, sometimes a long time ago, like childhood trauma, the memories keep playing in our heads over and over, and it makes us feel depressed. Now, to illustrate what happens to our bodies when we experience prolonged stress, anxiety, or depression, consider this interesting fact. So when I compete in an Ironman triathlon race in Langkawi, that one day of swimming and cycling and running, I can burn a staggering 6,000 calories. By the end of the day, I would have probably lost 2 or even 3 kilos of weight. A world champion chess grandmaster competing in a world championship chess tournament also burns 6,000 calories. Now, clearly not from the physical activity of moving chess pieces around, but from the brain working really hard, thinking about multiple chess scenarios 50 moves ahead. Because our brains, they represent only 2% of our body weight, but it consumes over 20% of all the calories that we eat. Right? This is why when we're overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, and depression, with all the negative thoughts playing over and over in our heads, we become physically fatigued and tired. And over time, we become sick with high blood pressure and diabetes and heart diseases. So learning to build resilience and optimism and perseverance requires us to learn how to control these videos playing in our heads of these anxious thoughts of the future or the depressed thoughts of the past. Now, there are two things that I want to share with you. First, it's mind wandering. The average person experiences mind wandering 47% of the time when they're awake. That means the brain is thinking of another thought instead of the task that we're supposed to be doing. So for example, right, when you listen to me on this video, half of you may actually be doing something else, right? Like checking your WhatsApp messages or social media, answering emails, or writing a report, right? And that's one habit that most of us are guilty of, which is we're trying to simultaneously multitask. We think we're being productive by doing several things at once, but that's not what's happening. Our brain cannot multitask. It does one thing at a time. And what we're actually doing is we're jumping from one task to the other every few seconds, right? 7 seconds answering a WhatsApp message, 10 seconds listening to this webinar, then 12 seconds I'm focusing on writing an email, and 9 seconds talking to someone. Each time we shift from one task to the other, it takes the brain more energy to make that switch, right? Because imagine driving a car where you keep accelerating and braking, and turning every few seconds. That wears down the energy very fast and it burns more petrol. Driving efficiently is when we drive at a constant speed in one direction and only making turns periodically. So to train our brain to focus, we need to learn how to do one thing at a time. Right? Try spending 25 minutes writing a report while shutting down all your notifications and putting away your phone. When it comes to emails, do it in batches, right? For 25 minutes, I answer all my emails and then I close off the browser and I move on to another task. Even when we're having dinner with our families, right? Learn to have dinner and be present with our family members instead of trying to simultaneously send WhatsApp messages while we eat or watch TV while we eat. Now, the next mental resilience building technique I've used is visualization. This is a technique that top athletes do over and over again to replace those negative thoughts in their heads with thoughts of the outcomes that they want. This requires more effort, right? Sitting down in a quiet place and really taking 10 to 15 minutes to visually imagine the successful outcome that you're working towards, right? Build it up in 3 areas to focus, right? The first is visual elements, the imagery, the colors, the people in the background and surroundings. Next, the kinesthetics, how our body moves. Imagine the parts of your body in action, whether you're giving a speech or closing a deal or participating in an event. Go through the motions in your head. And finally, right, add in the auditory elements, the sounds, right, from what you say, what other people say, and the background noise, like crowds cheering for you. Imagine it all first. The final element that I want to share today is surrounding ourselves with people who energize us and minimizing the time we spend with people who drain our energy. And I'm sure you can relate to this, right? Who are the people you know that you'll be inspired and motivated and be much more positive and optimistic after you spend time with them? And I bet you'll also know people in your lives that create negativity, sow doubt, and drain your energy. So life is full of challenges, and trying to get through it all alone is doubly difficult. So remember, when I talked about how when we are stressed, a surge of hormones surge through our body, what is less known is that our body also sends another hormone, oxytocin. It's the love hormone or the cuddle hormone, right? That helps people connect and bond with one another. It's the hormone that floods a mother and a newborn baby to build that connection. And so our body is telling us that when we're stressed, we need to reach out to other humans and lean on them for support. So choosing to spend time with positive people makes all the difference. And the great thing about the Nu Skin community and the Nu Skin family is that there's so many positive and supportive people here. Learn from each other, lean on one another, and most importantly, energize and boost each other. All the best.